If you don't find your calling in life now, then I promise you'll regret it later. Find out how to find your calling in life in this video in 6 easy steps. The problem with life, the way most of us are living it these days, is that we don't always give a lot of thought to our true calling, at least not enough, or not early enough. In fact, there's a book by a woman named Bronnie Ware. She's a hospice nurse who worked in hospice care where people are dying. And she interviewed people to find out their top 5 regrets on their deathbed. And what she found was that the number 1 regret that people had, all genders, all ages, was, I wish I'd had the courage to live a life true to myself rather than the one others expected of me. That's really powerful. And that's why it's so important to have these conversations and to ask these questions earlier in life. So here are 6 things you can do to find your calling right now. The first thing is to notice where in your life you feel envy. Now, I know envy is one of these emotions that people judge and nobody wants to feel it, and certainly no one wants to admit that they feel it. But the fact is that envy serves a purpose. The reason we feel envy as human beings is because envy helps us evolve. When we feel envious of someone else, that's an indication that there's something there that we want more of. So rather than it being a negative emotion, we can actually turn it into something positive. So ask yourself, where do you feel envious in your life? Where do you look at someone else's life and say, man, I love what they're doing? Where do you feel yourself called? And where do you find yourself sometimes judging yourself because you're not doing that thing? So pay attention to where you feel envious because it can be a clue to what your calling in life is. The second thing that you can do to find your calling is to go back in time, to go back to your childhood, back before all the socialization and acculturation and rules and shoulds and all that, and look at what were you like as a kid? What mattered to you? When I was a little kid, my parents always wanted me to be successful and achieve, and I listened and I did all those things. But when I was later in my life trying to find out who I was and why I was here, I went back to the childhood version of me, and I remembered that something that mattered a lot to me were books. I loved to read. And I loved to read stories about other little girls who were doing incredible things. And when I started to ask myself, what's my purpose in life? Little by little, it started to become clear that I really wanted to write books. And that's what I'm doing right now. I'm working on writing books. And that's a part of me fulfilling my calling. And it was a clue that came from my childhood. So think about the things you love to do, the things that you spent time doing, that you never had to be told to do them because you loved them so much. What was that? Did you love to sing or dance or jump or play or direct talent shows in your basement? That was another thing I used to do. Go back in time, and if you've forgotten, ask people who knew you back when. Ask childhood friends. Ask your parents. Ask people, what was I like as a little kid? What did I love to do? What do you remember about me when I was most joyful? These are great questions to ask to find clues to your calling. Oh, and don't forget to go back and look at yearbooks, albums, and old journals. These are great places to find clues about you as a child. The third thing is maybe the hardest thing that I'm going to suggest you do. The third is to fully feel your feelings. Now, what I mean by that is that a lot of times we try to focus only on positive emotions and positive feelings. We have a cultural appreciation for happiness and joy and smiles, and sometimes that means that we try to avoid or ignore any emotions that aren't happiness, joy, and smiles. But the thing is, the key to your calling sometimes lies in your deepest pain, in your biggest problems, in the things that you avoid and don't want to look at, in the feelings that are the most painful. See, the negative, quote unquote, I'm going to say quote unquote negative emotions because they're not negative, they're just emotions. The emotions that we avoid, the negative ones, are often indicators of deep discontent. I call it divine dissonance. Divine dissonance is that feeling you get when something's not quite right, when you're not living your purpose, when you're not living out your fullest potential. Now, that feeling of divine dissonance is something that we sometimes try to drown or bury with food or shopping or making more money or relationships. But that divine dissonance, that feeling, that disconnect, is a clue to something deeper. And so I invite you to feel all the feelings, even the painful, not so pretty ones, so that you can figure out, what is this feeling trying to tell me? What is the wisdom in this pain? And I promise you, there is always wisdom in pain. The fourth way to find out what your calling is to go way forward in your life and imagine yourself at the end of your days. Maybe even picture yourself on your own deathbed and write your obituary. Oh yeah, I know. It's pretty serious. You sit down and you start writing your obituary, and very clearly you can see, what is the legacy that my truest, innermost self really wants to leave in this world? The fifth strategy is to change the way you look at finding your calling. And what that means is change your language. You're not finding anything. You haven't lost anything. What you're doing instead is you're choosing your calling. And the beautiful thing about choosing is that you can choose again anytime you want. So just choose for right now what you're going to make your calling. And remember that you can allow yourself the flexibility and the grace to change it if something else comes up later. The last way that I recommend that you find your calling in life is to go inward, is to go deep within you and have a conversation with your own heart. I know that might sound a little cheesy. Even hearing myself say that, I'm making fun of myself a little bit. But it's true. Your heart actually has wisdom. And I don't mean it in a theoretical sense. I'm talking about actual neurons. We know now from studies that have been done of the heart that the heart has about 40,000 neurons. Now, we've always associated neurons with the brain, but the fact is we now know that your heart does think. But it doesn't think in pictures or in sounds or in images or movements. Your heart thinks in feelings. So when you slow down, close your eyes, put your hand on your heart, you can actually have a conversation with your own heart, and your heart will tell you what it wants. It will tell you what it needs if you create the space to have that conversation. So go ahead and ask your heart, what is my purpose? What is my calling in life? And slow down and just listen to what it says. If you're looking to build a business that's aligned with your true calling in life, then I can help. Go to monetizeyourmagicplaybook.com and work your way through my playbook for how to align what you do with who you really are and what you really care about. Enjoy.